All right, everyone. We will be back to the program in just a moment. But before we do, I want to share something that Blockworks has been cooking up for these last couple of months. March of this coming year in London, Blockworks is hosting DAS London, the largest institutionally focused conference in all of crypto. Goldman, JP Morgan, Point72, all in one room so you can know what the big money is doing. So click the link at the bottom of this episode. It'll take you right over to the homepage and use BELL20 for 20% off. And I will see you in sunny London town in March.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bell Curve. Before we jump in, quick disclaimer, the views expressed by my co-host today are their personal views and they do not represent the views of any organization with which the co-hosts are associated with. Nothing in the episode is construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. You know the deal. Now, let's jump into the episode.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bell Curve. You got Michael's 1 and 2, Vance, and special guest Sam Hart, who's been on the show before. But Sam, welcome. Michael, Vance, what's going on, everyone?
Good to be here.
Just hanging out.
Post Turkey Day.
Yeah. What do people do for with big family time? Did anyone cook or attempt to cook anything? It's a hard no.
Absolutely not.
I was in charge of a side. Let's just put it that way. That gives you all the confidence that my family has in me for cooking.
What did they put you in charge of? Mashed potatoes?
No. I did a buffalo cauliflower dip. It's actually pretty good.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's like a 6.5, 7 difficulty. I would say that's showing some faith in you.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was at my girlfriend's family's place, and it was like a huge family, 60-person Thanksgiving. It was really intense.
First time meeting everybody, or second time?
Definitely some new faces I've met.
Yeah.
Always.
It's a lot.
Yeah. No pressure.
You made
no
it.
pressure in that scenario.
You made it back.
Yeah, nice. Well, all right, let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to ask you guys about, or maybe just bring up, obviously this is a little bit old news, but CZ is stepping down as the CEO of Binance in a pretty landmark deal made with the Department of Justice. So there was a large $4.3 billion fine. CZ is going to retain ownership, but he can't operate, being involved in any sort of operating capacity for the next 3 years or so. So obviously this is all relatively old news. I would love to get your guys, I guess, just high level take on it. Like there have been kind of divided. I think some people view this as like, okay, this is sort of the next step, right? This is one of the big hurdles or sort of like overhangs that still exist from a regulatory capacity. We know that U.S. regulators haven't been super friendly towards Binance. I think a lot of folks on crypto Twitter have had the idea that, look, CZ did a lot for this industry. We finally found out how many accounts Binance had. They had 150 million accounts. They've arguably onboarded more people into crypto than any other entity in existence. So I think there's kind of that angle to it. But I also wanted to get your guys' thoughts on where you see Binance market share. Which is just a question that I've been asking myself 3 years out, say. Is it less than it is today? Does Binance sort of slowly bleed out from here? Or I think you could actually make the counter argument that because the DOJ is going to be surveilling them, they're kind of one of the most trusted exchanges in crypto today. And they have the head start of a ton of liquidity and partnerships and all that stuff that they've been building out. So I guess what's your guys' high level take on the whole Binance and CZ stepping down?
Do you mean SEC market share or exchange market share?
Say again, Sam?
SEX market share or exchange market share generally?
That's a good question.
That's the question.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say both. Yeah, I'd like those both.
I mean, so just broadly speaking, you hit the nail on the head, Mike, with this is one of the overhangs of uncertainty that everybody had been thinking about, talking about, knew it was coming. Nobody knew when it was going to happen. It's one of those things where, like, when you're watching a scary movie and you finally see the monster that's been chasing people around, you're like, oh, well, okay, it's not that bad. I think that this is actually a pretty fundamentally bullish thing for the global crypto ecosystem. Just removing the uncertainty is huge. The other angle too, I think, is, and I saw a couple people positioning this way, is they were never going to let something like an ETF go through without the clearing of this type of a situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually pretty bullish as well for the ETF that's potentially happening in January-ish. So ultimately, I think this is a positive. It's the like 7th largest fine in the Department of Justice or in U.S. history, and maybe the largest in Department of Justice history. CZ also is not able to travel back to the UAE. In the meantime, he has his sentencing hearing in February. Like there's still a lot of stuff to figure out what's going to happen with this situation. Yes, they're going to be surveilled by the U.S. now. They also are going to have to totally cut ties with all U.S. customers. So I think that is probably one of the bigger questions in terms of are there still remaining U.S. customers as a vestige of the 2017, 2018 era. They're now not going to be able to trade on that platform. How they cut them off, remains to be seen, but it seems like they're going to move in that direction. I also saw that they're shutting down BUSD, which, they're going to have to start cutting off these products and services. So to Sam's point, I think broadly, our view is that DEX activity will overtake SEX activity in, a period of time, like in the next year or two. And I think this is one of the catalysts that helps make that happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. A lot of parts of finance that people don't have a full view on, nobody has a full view on, and there's a lot of parts of the regulatory action that people don't have a lot of visibility into. We're seeing delistings happening, but it's pretty clear they're going to be more constrained in some way. So that's a big question mark for me as to how effective they can be as a centralized exchange. We also don't know a whole lot about the internal leadership and morale and a lot of things, that intangibles that are like pretty important for having that kind of leading market position.
Yeah. Vance, what do you think?
The only other take I have on this is, the CME is now the largest open interest exchange in crypto. So it's not even like Binance market share is like slowly dwindling. It's just like these other exchanges are really gaining on them. And it's obviously not the same set of people. It's differentiated, it's institutions. And imagine what an ETF looks like compared to like spot centralized exchange, as we know them, volumes. Like it could be like the centralized exchanges in crypto are like pretty insignificant. Obviously, like a lot of the flow will hit Binance and like a rising tide will lift all boats, but I could see that happening. The other one, just in reading kind of the regulatory news this week is like, it's William Adebo, who is a treasury executive at the U.S. government. He's now, asking for more power to go after international stablecoin issuers. Obviously, like that's a code word for Tether, but to the extent he's able to succeed, it's like we've already kind of beaten that horse. They already had all those lawsuits. Like we'll see. But it just kind of goes to show you that no one is beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. Right. This guy seems like a nice guy, whatever. But like, no one is beyond the reach of these people. Even CZ, who was in a non-extradition country, had, $30-40 billion, whatever, however rich he is. It makes me nervous about Justin Sun and his status, because like he's like the last of the Mohicans in some ways, and we'll see if that persists. But like people are like, oh yeah, he just runs these like crazy scams on Tron, and like USDT isn't even USDT, and like nobody knows what's backing it. Like all good things must come to an end at some point, and so we'll see. And for a lot of these guys, like if the choice is you get to be a person with $10 or $20 billion, like maybe CZ or Justin Sun, but you have to stay within Dubai, Russia, Turkey, Iran, or North Korea. Like those are your vacation spots. Or you make a deal and you're like a global citizen again. What's the point of having all that money if you can't travel? It doesn't make any sense.
One of the variables that I think people kind of found out was in the plea deal with CZ, he will not appeal anything. He does not have the ability to appeal anything up to 18 months of jail time. but he does have the ability to appeal something if there is more than 18 months. How they got to that 18 months, no idea. But I think there is an element of there's not a 0% chance that CZ will face jail time when sentencing is up. Obviously, we know others like Arthur Hayes had house arrest, and there have been previous infractions in a similar vein, maybe not at the same scale, and obviously not with the backdrop that we have now. But there is an element of like this. The story is not done yet for CZ.
Yeah. I think it's tough to ever really fully predict that out. I agree with all of you guys. I just see centralized exchange market share dwindling. And I actually do, when we talk about Blast, I think a really good, interesting area that this is already playing out, frankly, is NFTs. Like if you look at what Blur has done on Ethereum, and if you look at what Tensor has done on Solana, it's been pretty remarkable to see just how fast that market share has shifted from a super dominant position from incumbents. So
the Department of Justice has like played a new card here. Like we know a little bit more information about their position, just because it's a regulatory action of this magnitude. There are things that they could have done that they didn't do, and so that might indicate to others how they may proceed in the future.
And namely, the person who, or the people who were not represented at the press conference was the SEC.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And CFTC, DOJ, Treasury, but no SEC. That does also leave open the potential for something else to happen.
Is anyone else interested in the price of BNB has held up very well? Like I don't know what I didn't have an expectation for how it would respond to something like this, but it's been interesting to me that hasn't really
I'm
moved.
super curious what happens to their chain, like
me too.
Sector, who knows?
I definitely a lot of unanswered questions and who knows, but I also think like we're talking about such a global ecosystem that 150 million people, even if it was 150 million people completely outside the United States, is so small in comparison to the global population that's interested in this. And I think, yes, there is a point of you are not, you are under the reach of the US regulators if you have any sort of US customer base. But I do think that Binance is something that will persist at the scale that it has. And the recognition with the BNB price or any of the ecosystem, like the trading volume hasn't fallen off precipitously. They're going to have to cut back stuff eventually. But we're talking about a global ecosystem, and there are regulatory regimes that are much more favorable for this. And frankly, where Binance has focused over the last few years, the bulk of these infractions happened before or during 2021. And, things have changed since then. So I don't know. It's possible that we just start to see like Binance as a rest of world operator that doesn't touch any US persons or customers, and they're going to be able to be, massive, therefore.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, I also I don't really know much about Richard Tang. It seems like he's got a great background. He could be sort of the Dara Khosrowshahi to, Travis Kalanick at Uber, and maybe I don't know. I could see it happening. I do think also, Vance, you made a really interesting point about CME. I feel like it's gotten a little bit of attention, but not an enormous amount. Maybe to just transition a little bit here. So CME open interest has absolutely exploded, and it feels like that's actually what's been leading some of at least the price action in Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's also interesting. I mean, people have been following this pretty closely, but Coinbase has been doing very well, and MicroStrategy has been outperforming as well. Some of these like public market proxies for crypto. Actually, Michael Saylor announced another $500 million Bitcoin buy.
He found 500 mil under the couch cushions and decided to buy some BTC.
Yeah, and he's issuing another $750 million worth of equity to presumably buy more Bitcoin. But both of those things taken in conjunction, it's kind of like when MicroStrategy and Coinbase starts to do well, that sort of smells like an institutional or more traditional interest in crypto. And same thing with CME. So it's just interesting to see all of that pick up ahead of a potential spot ETF approval and kind of gives some amount of data to support the idea that this could be an institutional led rally, actually. So I don't know if you guys agree with that, have thoughts, or yes, no?
I think that's what we're playing for. You know, like this is what takes it to, you know, 1 million BTC, 100K ETH. Like it can only happen with institutional inflows. Like I think you can get to like 5 to 10K ETH, you know, whatever, 100K for Bitcoin with just retail and, you know, like leverage enabled by perps and things like that, but it's never going to be sustainable. And so like this is the secret ingredient. I do think it's interesting that, you know, maybe kind of like a counter perspective is like Bitcoin's at, Sailor bought it at like 37 or something, I think was his average price.
Yeah, just under 36 something.
Well, yeah, his total average is like 30K.
Okay.
Yeah, but the last tranche was like 37.
Yeah, 37. Average. Yep.
I mean, it just goes to show you like how much money is needed to move Bitcoin. 700 million is like a lot. And I think if you put that into just about any other crypto asset, it would like quadruple. But it's just like, you know, rock is heavy, hard to move. Grug smash. It's tough out there.
That's true.
Like, you know, if we get $10 billion of inflows in the first year, that's, you know, 15 Michael Saylors. Just think about that.
Well, Michael Saylors this week.
Right. I guess they start stacking at some point, but like,
right.
You need a lot of capital to move this thing, and it can feed on itself. But I would say we're just painting the base coat right now. You know, absorbing some supply ahead of the ETF. We're just getting our ducks in order. I think it's going to be interesting next year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I also do think though that, you know, Bitcoin being larger and having it, you know, be more liquid and all that kind of stuff, it means this was always going to be what happened, right? It's not going to have these crazy, maybe it won't have as many of these crazy moves, but that is what opens it up to like real institutional money, like sovereign wealth funds and pensions, who always found, you know, I just heard this from a lot of the people on like the allocator side that I used to talk to, is like Bitcoin's just too small even. So you do at a certain point when you get larger, you actually unlock a new supply of investors that you didn't have before.
That's true.
So, you know,
what do we think that magnitude is? You know, what's a benchmark for like small versus large asset for these allocators?
I think it has to do less with the size of the asset, more with the volume on a trusted intermediary. And that's where the CME actually becomes really, really important, because that's how these players are going to be able to get in. Historically, if you're, you know, a pension fund or someone, you know, who manages hundreds of billions of dollars or tens of billions of dollars, your options are basically like Coinbase or like an OTC desk who's, you know, spreading that around to a bunch of different Coinbase-like entities. Yeah, it's not very simple to buy Bitcoin spot in size.
Just out of curiosity, I guess you'd have to spread this across like the ETF and, but like how much gold? What's a daily volume on something like gold that trades hands? Does anyone know?
Let's see. I mean, like, you know, I was looking at Snapchat earlier that has like $500 million of volume a day. So like, it's interesting. In traditional finance, it seems like the alts are like more liquid than your average crypto alt, which kind of makes sense. But gold, I think it's probably trading like, let's see, I would guess around what Bitcoin does in a day.
But what is that? Is that GLD volume? Is that like the tough part is there's like gold spot, but you're not really trading that. It's all going to be a proxy.
All right. I got an answer here. I mean, this seems wildly. I mean, it says here it's 130 billion a day for gold. S&P 500 stocks are trading about 240 billion a day. It is worth noting that gold is the planet's largest asset, so that kind of does make sense intuitively. But, you know, we're working with like maybe like 3 to 5% of like daily gold volume in crypto.
Okay. I mean, I honestly, I could see myself being totally wrong on this, but that actually that sounds directionally correct. Sounds right. Sam, what do you think?
I feel like there's even gold trading that's not like super visible, that's used for kind of internal
100%.
accounting. So even the number that we're looking at there is not necessarily representative of like the entire volume. So it's very hard to project.
Right.
Also, congrats to Gold Bugs. It's above 2050, and they've been waiting for that since 2018. So big shout out to them.
Yeah, we're happy for you guys. Let's
Yeah.
go.
They're by the way, they are the most. They're the second most insane people on the planet. You know who the first most insane group is?
No,
Silver Bugs.
really?
Those people are working with some raw materials in their head. I don't know what is going on, but someone convinced them a long time ago that silver was the key to generational Citadel wealth. Crazy.
Just like Litecoin.
Yeah, literally.
First bag.
Wow.
Dude, one of the Thanksgiving stories I heard was basically this someone's mother who was like really into was a gold bug, and then kind of got into Bitcoin through like an anti-vax channel. So yeah, I mean it all checks out. The crazy like aggregates.
The math
classic,
checks out.
classic impossible.
It adds up.
Yeah. All right, let's actually one, by the way, just on that note about Tether, I feel like this, so Hart Lambert was on this podcast last week, and he dropped this little tidbit that I feel like should have gotten slightly more attention. So he was in Istanbul for DevConnect or whatever, and he mentioned that you can go, there's these markets, I think there's one particularly famous market out there. And he said you can literally go and show up with like $10 million worth of cash and convert that into Tether. Like,
oh yeah,
you can. Yeah.
There's
I feel like that's a slightly kind of a big story.
There's even crazier stories that we've heard. I'll tell you one.
Yeah.
So in I'm not going to name the country, and we haven't done this, but we work with a company that does seizures and custody for like law enforcement and big government agencies. And one of the examples that they gave us was you get in this Telegram group or WhatsApp or whatever, and there's a guy obviously, and it's like, hey, I've got a bunch of Tether that I want to redeem into cash or gold. And what they will do is they will you'll send the Tether to an escrow, and they will drop a bag and they'll bury it in the woods, and they'll put an Apple AirTag on it. And you use Find My to find the AirTag, and you dig for the bag, and you dig up the bag, and it's full of like gold or cash or whatever. Anyways, we're the good guys on this one. We're helping stop this. But the OTC market for Tether and like into cash or physical assets, it's very real, and it happens globally.
To be clear, the company that we're partnered with is the ones trying to prevent this from happening.
Right. This is not like,
it's a great business opportunity. Yeah.
It is for if you're helping the law enforcement and government side, it is. But
so I thought the crazy tidbit, I think it was maybe Hart who said it, or somebody that I heard who was at DevConnect, taking it back to Justin Sun, was the dominant network that everybody trades USDT on is Tron.
Right.
It's the vast majority of where USDT exists, which I had kind of known, but I forgot about for a while. And it is the dominant platform in these countries. And it's not even USDC. And the reason why I think he was talking about, or someone was talking about, was just because of that one, Saturday in March when everything blew apart, went down to 92 cents. And then rocketed back up. That distrust is enough to be able to push people into, USDT.
Wait, I can't remember. Now I'm mixing up. I can't remember if you and I talked about this, or if someone, I don't remember who told me this, but someone said something very similar to what you just said. And actually the perception of people in other countries is that like the Tether team is like more legit and better, like more business oriented than the Circle team, which just blew my mind.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, that IPO or the Circle IPO that's been rumored or planned. I think there was something on the internet in 2024. It'd be a weird look if like your business just got halved and you're going public. I'm not sure how that works.
I think there is like a real lesson to be learned here though for the crypto industry, which is like the Tether go to market looked very, very different from the Circle go to market. Like the whole infrastructure, wallet, integration, deployment strategy, very different. The organization is kind of tentacular in a way that like is just kind of structurally like not what Circle looks like. And these are some of the things that you need to get deployment into countries that want access to these dollarized coins. So I'm fascinated by what that infrastructure actually looks like, what the kind of org structure looks like there. And it's hard to dig up information on it. I would love to talk to somebody who's like really boots on the ground.
I don't think they want to talk to you or
I don't think so either.
I mean, like the bull case for Tron is very clear. The bear case also very clear. Like, part of me thinks that at some point, like the centralized sequencers, the networks that are facilitating, basically like centralized transactions and transmissions of money, like those are very clear like BSA violations. And at some point that will come to a head, and it's either going to come to a head just by the, some senator today asked Circle if they were aiding and abetting Justin Sun. Like we're not far from like you wake up and it's like, the same thing with CZ is happening to Justin.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I don't know if you guys 5 years ago, if we were, talking about main characters, who was going to make it through this, I would not have been betting on His Excellency, but he's been pretty bulletproof, to his credit. And I actually did have, I was talking to someone, so far. Right. I was talking to someone who works at a, I don't want to actually out. They're working kind of like infrastructure and sort of a capital markets type role. And they were saying they'd been hearing that, like the SEC commissioners, were getting briefed on more MEV related stuff. And I think I'm starting to hear it come through that this like MEV stuff that was like a dark forest thing that crypto internet nerds talked about is like making its way towards regulators, and they're starting to understand it more, which was always going to happen, but it's tough to get the timeline. So anyway.
Yeah. You ever heard of like the object permanence problem?
Not really. What is
it's something that little children have where like, if I'm in a room and I go behind a wall, they think I've like disappeared from the planet. Same thing goes with like, these regulatory infractions. It's like, if you don't get caught the second you commit the crime, you're free. You're not guilty. Just like, that's not how that works. The charges are still in the room with you. They just haven't presented yet. So like, we'll see, like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I advise everyone to think about the long game, just not worth it.
We're still working our way through like 2020 stuff, and it's, about to be 2024.
Yep. I agree. All right, everyone, we will be back to the program in just a moment. But before we do, I want to share something that Blockworks has been cooking up for these last couple of months. March of this coming year in London, Blockworks is hosting DAS London, the largest institutionally focused conference in all of crypto. We are gathering 1,200 of the world's largest asset managers. So think TradFi macro funds, crypto native funds, big allocators, and financial institutions. So banks, payment processors, etc., all in one spot. It's very rare to get the likes of Goldman, JP Morgan, Point72, whatever, all in one room, so you can know what the big money is doing. We're diving into the themes that they care about. So we're talking about the intersection of macro and crypto, where we are in the cycle, real world assets, so everything from stable coins to on-chain treasuries to tokenized assets. It's going to be a blast. But the other reason you really want to go is London, baby. Center of the world at one point. You got pub culture, you got fish and chips, great beer. It's going to be a blast. So because you're such great listeners to Bell Curve, there's a code BELL20 that's going to get you 20% off. So click the link at the bottom of this episode. It'll take you right over to the homepage. You'll see all of our speakers, and use BELL20 for 20% off. Ticket prices are going up soon. Make sure you go, use that code. I will see you in sunny London town in March. Okay, so speaking of, I don't want to use that sequitur. Let's talk about Blast. So Blast, so Blast is the new layer 2, which is launched by Pac-Man. So Pac-Man is the founder of Blur, the marketplace, which honestly has been relatively controversial. I think there have been some, my personal opinion is sort of bad takes that they killed the NFT market, which I don't necessarily agree with. They've eaten an enormous amount of market share actually from OpenSea. Here, I actually will share my screen. I've got some, there's a pretty good Dune dashboard by Hill Dobby that covers this, but Pac-Man is clearly a good founder. He's got very good insights. He is, 24 years old. He's doing quite a bit. He's running 2 companies here. So he led Paradigm and Standard co-led a $20 million round to launch Blast. They had a very different go-to-market strategy, same to your point about Tether, where they basically launched as a multi-sig, and they, it's kind of a one-way multi-sig where you can deposit funds that you can't get out for 3 months. And the whole point of Blast as a layer 2 is that there's native yield. So what Blast does under the hood is it reallocates user deposits into one of 2 places, I believe, which is just Steth today, or into Maker. So you're getting treasury yield or sort of the ETH stake rate. They attracted about, I think it's just under 600 million in TVL now.
I think it's higher than that now, but yeah.
So, I mean, lots of. I mean, what's your guys' take on this at a high level? Be curious.
Got to put a lot of trust into that multi-sig.
I mean, we've done a couple of things like that in the past, but I don't see me putting full trust multi-sig anytime soon.
Oh, I've been surprised that this much went in. Yeah, it's like, how much are you really expecting to get in terms of rewards? It actually just feels like there's even better rewards that you could get elsewhere. There's better use of your capital.
So I think the global comment is, independent of Blast or whatever, is like, if you can put up a multi-sig and have this new L2 backed by whomever, launching whenever, obtain $600 million of TVL over the course of the last 4 weeks, like, crypto's back. Animal spirits are back.
True.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
I have two thoughts on this. Like, one, Blast marketing and kind of sketchiness in the multi-sig, I think, pretty clear. It's off. It smells wrong. I haven't talked to anybody who wasn't a little bit concerned about it. The other big part of the narrative is basically whether stake tokens should be used on L2s, and how that kind of changes the assumptions about how the L2 operates, the security model, the kind of validator set composition, and kind of control structure of the ETH token. And it's definitely like forcing the hands of other L2s. It's putting some pressure on them to think about yield opportunities of the bridge contract between the L1 and the L2.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Steth supply is ripped higher. I think there's been like 400 or 500,000 Steth.
Yep.
Or maybe a little bit less than that, 300, 350. DAI supply from this is also ripping higher. And so like, this is what really good infrastructure looks like. If there's something happening on chain, you downstream of it become the beneficiary. And to Michael's point, like, we're back and there's going to be so many of these token farms. And I know a lot of them are going to use this same Blast strategy, because why wouldn't you? It's obviously working. And they, it's pretty easy to put together, at least a multi-sig is. So like, I think the changes in this in my mind are like, I'm neither bullish nor bearish Blast, neither endorse nor back their tactics. But I think Steth supply, in general, staked ETH supply is going to be higher than most people project. I would say it's probably going to be like 60 or 70%, closer to like Cosmos or like Solana. It'll take time, but like, this is like a week of farming and there's like 300,000 Steth that have been staked because of it. Play that out over a super bullish year with restaking, with all that stuff. I think that's the first one. And then the second one is probably DAI supply is like more bullish on DAI supply. And a lot of it's going into the DSR, which is like not directly benefiting Maker because, Maker buys the treasuries, then they pass through the yield on the 5%, flat pass through. But once endgame farming starts and like, the tokens aren't going to the DSR, they're going to like farm these sub-DAO tokens at like 10 or 15% APY. Like you could see like Maker being a huge beneficiary of this trend. And like, why wouldn't USDC fill this role? A, there's no yield pass back, and B, the KYC obligations around converting that much money into that many USDC stablecoins. That's probably something that Circle is going to be like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think so. I have a lot of thoughts on it, I guess. I think to your point about, I guess I have a sort of uneasy feeling about it, but I also think it's probably going to work and probably become something that looks more like the norm. Like if you think about this from the standpoint of, and actually I want to give, I had a long conversation with Miles about this. This was sort of his observation. I think it's true, which is that if you think about the challenge from a regular L2, okay, you're launching into a sea of layer twos. How exactly do you differentiate? Really what you need is to attract users and developers to build on your platform as opposed to Arbitrum or Optimism or Scroll or whoever. Now, if you don't have any like latent user funds or something, that's a very different conversation. But now Blast can say, hey, come build here. We have $570 million or $600 million worth of TVL. There's clearly a lot of latent demand, right? So it makes those conversations, I would guess, quite a bit easier. So I think from that standpoint, it's actually a pretty good strategy. I think my sort of concern about this is that, so here, they tweeted this out, but my concern would just be like, what are the risks and controls here? Because basically what you have here is kind of like an on-chain BlockFi structure, right? Where you've got people that deposit things and then you're turning around and putting that into something that generates yield. Now you're passing all of that onto the user. There's a totally different revenue model, but if you look at the balance sheet of like a Blast versus something like BlockFi, it looks sort of similar. And my just concern would be like, have we thought through like what is the infrastructure that's managing this right behind the scenes? And actually there was an example where
it's a multi-sig.
It's a multi-sig. It's a freaking multi-sig
pieces of
and
technology as well.
Oh, and I'll get the screenshot. We can drop it in when this actually goes live. But someone caught that, if you deposit like Tether, what they were turning around and doing was converting that into DAI through Curve, but the default tolerance or slippage tolerance was set to 10%. So they lost like $100,000, and then they just had to front the user that money. They give them an extra 10% bonus, but it's like, come on, guys, this doesn't make me feel particularly great about the protocols that are supporting something like this. And there could be weird edge cases. Like, what if there's an enormous amount of people that want to withdraw? I would guess you have like a market maker on the other side of that maybe like bridges the gap for a little bit. But these all feel like unanswered questions, and I feel like they're pretty important. So I guess I have a general feeling of nervousness about the whole thing.
The other sharp edge is like the whole ecosystem is a rebasing ecosystem. None of the contracts can be like directly migrated over. You have to like reimagine the entire structure of like these DeFi protocols so that they work with Rebase as a kind of native function. So I could see some blowups happening from that. Just put guns there. That's going to be a very complex challenge to navigate.
Rebasing is one of the most difficult constructs to be dealing with. Maybe not as a user, but as any sort of intermediary or custodian or developer. So I was literally about to say I think the construct is going to be problematic going forward.
Why would they do a rebasing instead of an exchange rate mechanism? Like, it makes sense for something like Steth. I understand the psychological importance of Steth equaling ETH, and that makes sense to me. But I'm a little confused about the decision to do rebase here. Is there some logic on this?
Non-rebasing is hard too. Like,
there's other challenges.
Is what we use for a lot of our on-chain stuff. And you're like, what's the price of Wraps ETH? Like, how much ETH is that? Like, where's our liquidation price? Like, it's like hard to manage. Rebasing, at least it's like, one ETH is one stETH, and you get more each day.
What that tells me is two things. Number one, what they will be attracting is retail, because I think retail will care about more of the atomicity of what one token actually equals, and rebasing just means more tokens. It also tells me that, and they're not going to have as much, custodial support, infrastructure, intermediary support, just because of that. Because rebasing is not like, no one who's an intermediary can support a rebasing token, which is why wrap state ETH exists. The second is the bulk of the people that they're probably going to go after are non-US. Because in the US, what you get with a wrapped token versus a rebasing token is a capital gain versus something that's declared income. And it's a minor point, but every single time you're earning more tokens, that's income versus something that you can wrap into an eventual capital gain or loss, but it at least is cap gains or losses as opposed to income.
Okay, question for you guys. Like, maybe last one on this. Do you think, because I forget, Sam or Michael, one of the two, you made this point that it might kick off the pressure for other layer twos to respond more immediately. But also, I feel like there's a temptation to look around, and if Blast is really successful, and say, hey, there's a bunch of just piles of ETH sitting around here being not very capital efficient. Maybe we should try to find a home for them in something like Lido, for instance. And I do wonder if this sort of kicks off a capital efficiency meme almost, wherein everyone starts questioning why there are these pools of ETH just sitting around not earning yield.
Ditto stable coins, ditto, ETH. But like, one way to think about this is like, there is, how many? There's probably 70 million ETH that are unstaked. There's like 100 billion of stable coins that are not earning any yield. It's pretty simple to spin up a multi-sig. It implies a very high valuation if you already have 800 million of value in this Blast multi-sig. And so the L2 itself is probably worth billions. And, generally one way to think about crypto is like, the lowest amount of effort that can generate the highest dollar amount of profits is going to be like DDoSed by people. Like, they're going to spin up 50,000 Uniswap clones. They're going to spin up 50,000 NFT collections. Like, the techno grift is real. They will go after it. And, who are the winners? I think the winners are the obvious, like the L2s, Blast, like probably like high enterprise value. The winners are the users who, frankly, like get more yield and, airdrops and all that stuff. But like, mostly the winners are like the large infrastructure plays that sit below these things, like stETH and whatever, even if it's not DAI, even if it's like, I can't even think of another yield bearing one, but there are them. Like, those are the winners. Who are the losers? USDC and USDT. I guess
anyone who thinks the ETH stake rate is going to stay low.
anyone who's betting on the ETH stake rate being low. But like, I think the bull case for Lido is like, they have like 30 million ETH staked, and they're like 32 or 33% or whatever the number is, of like, that's like the new way that we think about it, just from this stuff, because there's going to be so many of these farms.
Okay, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, let's say you're an Optimism and you're at the stage where you have a decentralized sequencer, and you're considering converting your entire bridge contract into staked ETH. You already have to curate a operator set for your decentralized sequencer. Why not just have them run Ethereum nodes and become a liquid staking protocol? Like, the operational overhead is zero, basically.
When do you think that decentralized sequencer comes?
You're the ETH guys. I don't know.
like the next Winter Olympics is my guess.
Yeah.
Like Italy 2026. Like, here's the reality is like, this is all going to happen in the next like 2 years. Like, and then you're going to kind of ossify into like the dominant infrastructure and like the also rans. And there's also like probably a bunch of stuff that Optimism has to do to even like regulatory clear this. And like if you're a foundation, at least a US, formally domiciled one, like you are very careful in what you are doing, and you are making sure that it is like as limited of scope as possible. Like, I guess part of the reason that I'm so uncomfortable with Blast is like, this doesn't seem legal, like, like it's like Michael and me being like, all right, send the money to our Fireblocks address. We're going to do something with it and we'll give it back to you in 5 months. Like, it's just like problematic. Maybe it's possible in a decentralized context, but like the optics don't get that much better.
I'll tell you what was not helping them out either was those little graphics they drew of their marketing strategy, which I do feel, by the way, I will, just because we're being a little hard on Blast, like they're not running a Ponzi scheme. That has like dominated the narrative, and that's a really silly accusation. It's
not a Ponzi,
not
it's something
a Ponzi
else,
scheme.
But it's not a Ponzi.
It's something else that's not a Ponzi. Yeah, and I've just listened to a bunch of debates about whether or not Blast is a Ponzi, and it's like kind of a stupid conversation actually. So
I also think Tishan is like a good entrepreneur. Like Blur is like a good product, and like if he ends up winning, nobody's gonna remember that it started as a multi-sig, right? So like it's kind of like too soon to tell, but also gets back to like the CZ and Justin Sun point where it's like nothing's happened yet.
But also, to be fair, like optimism is multi-sig. Like we haven't surpassed multi-sigs here. It's just,
Yeah, no, but it feels, even though we haven't surpassed them, it feels like people are starting to get wise, like I saw some hack happen on Base, and my first reaction was like, ooh, how does Coinbase deal with that? Because like you can brick the withdrawal from the chain if you really want to.
Coinbase has a lot of interest. There are a lot of interesting questions to be asked around how Coinbase will deal with stuff. Frankly,
In CZ's lawsuit is a quote of him saying like it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Maybe.
I mean, maybe. Well, look at this. I mean, here's a very plausible scenario, not to return to CZ, that could play out for him. Binance pays that massive fine. He pays his $50 million fine, right? Which I think he had to settle with the CFTC. Yep. He could, maybe, let's say we split the difference and say he gets like 9 months of a house arrest type jail, and he still retains control of Binance. Was he right? Because he'll wake up in 3 years, he'll be able to operate Binance again. It was a really high risk reward strategy that he ran.
It's like the Joe Low $1 billion whale perspective of like, if you get to be so big that you make $10 billion, you have to pay $1 billion fine, but then you keep the 9.
True. Joe Low is kind of a different story though.
Totally. But the concept of, I mean, it's the same thing with Tether too, to a certain extent. It's like they've gotten to be so big that, any sort of ramifications are I mean, mincing storylines here, but I think Binance has something like 6.5 billion of liquid assets on their balance sheet that people have been able to track down. So yeah, it's 2/3 of their balance sheet. Maybe they have more off chain, but it's definitely not as bad as it could have been, and they get to continue to operate.
Cool. Maybe just because I'd love to get your guys' opinions. I do want to, it's sort of related to Blast, but I'd love to get your opinions on like Blur and kind of like NFT on-chain market structure. I think it's a pretty, I'm going to share my screen here, and then Sam, we're going to call on you to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on in the Cosmos, because even for the typical Cosmos governance drama, it's been a big week. So I hadn't really been paying that much attention to NFTs until pretty recently. But I was pretty surprised. I knew that Blur had been doing well, but I didn't know that the market share has shifted so drastically. So this is in this past week, Blur by volume had 78% of trading volume went through Blur compared to 17% at OpenSea, and that I can't really remember at one point what OpenSea used to have in terms of market share, but I think it was high 90s. Right?
Yeah.
Mid-90s?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and you can actually see the same thing being replicated over in the Solana ecosystem with Tensor. So Tensor, it's an on-chain marketplace. It's a pretty small team. A couple of founders. and they've eaten all the market share away from Magic Eden as well. I would be curious. I'd be curious what you guys think about this, because especially because and how much this comes down to incentives and airdrop farming and the promise of token rewards, because this was a huge decision that OpenSea was being faced with when Blur launched. They were like, are we going to launch a token in response? They ultimately opted not to do that. And to be honest, it looks like that was probably not the right decision. That was probably the wrong decision.
OpenSea revenue down 99% in the last 18 months.
Yeah, that's tough.
Like 50% of the team, they let go of recently. They did a leadership offsite recently. I mean, they're going to have to chart a new path forward. It's not like really a competition anymore, I would say.
Damn. I will say this for Pac-Man. He at some point in one of these Twitter threads that he's done recently, he sort of stated these like two observations that he had, that NFTs, basically his whole thing is that you should treat NFTs kind of like altcoins, and there deserves to be an institutional grade perp market, and it should be cheaper. And he really leaned into the sort of to maybe be a little bit pejorative, like the altcoins with pictures view of NFTs. And I think at least for the current customer that exists and what people are using NFTs for today, it looks like that was the right call.
I mean, the analogy that I think of is like, it's kind of like eBay, the marketplace for the long tail of assets versus Amazon, the place where you go and buy everything. And I think that I mean, you can look at the relative market caps, and I think that largely that trajectory is going to continue to play out. But OpenSea has been a marketplace for individual assets. The financialization of or the trading financialization of NFTs has become Blur. And sure, incentives hypercharge that transition, but I think that the strategy of that, has definitely been the right strategy too.
I'm just looking at like the actual NFTs that have traded hands over the past month. There's like two kind of bigger moments. One was like the Yuga Labs, like CryptoPunks announcement, and like all those floors getting swept. And then there's obviously Mad Lads on Solana, which is kind of popping off even today. And then there's like basically like some wash trading or smaller collections. Like I'm hesitant to like make any definitive statements about the NFT market, because there's really only like three assets that like you can buy. It's like CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, Fidenzas, maybe. Like we really think the NFT market is going to go in basically like the polar opposite direction of where it is today. Like super low cost, more vertically oriented, like gaming NFTs. And like you don't need a perp to trade like a $2 sword in a game. You just like need a spot market for that. And really like the perps only make sense with like the high value asset class markets. And so it's like, how much do you believe in PFPs being worth $500,000 persistently over 10 collections, not just 3? My confidence is low.
During the last cycle, when OpenSea was really top dog, there was this thing where OpenSea was kind of your primary gallery as like an NFT holder. It's where you like went to view and like understand and kind of appreciate your collection. And that was actually like a key element of its success, in my opinion. And the combination of like the market cratering and wallets and kind of specific gallery applications like really maturing during that time period, I think actually shifts the kind of use case a bit. So OpenSea isn't able to kind of like rest on that that user stickiness where they're like, oh, I want to look at my JPEGs. You do that elsewhere now. You do it in like Rainbow Wallet, or you do it in like one of these other venues that's like a little bit more specifically designed for that purpose.
Yeah, I buy that. Yeah.
I can see a founder building like a super low cost, super low fee, oriented at super low cost again items, and this becomes like the prosumer. Like Blur becomes like the prosumer trading venue for people who want to like speculate on Fidenzas being the next like Picassos. But that latter market, while it's filled with prosumers, and like that's generally what the market of crypto is filled with today, like it doesn't expand infinitely the way that other asset classes do for NFTs.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I will say, I think one of the things, maybe I'm a little bit hopeful about this, but I would hope that people in this cycle, because I am excited about NFTs. I feel like they're going to come back at some point, but I hope people experiment a little bit on the model. Like I've chilled this to you guys a bunch, but like what Luca Netz is doing at Pudgy Penguins feels like he's sort of rewriting the NFT business model and playbook in a way that makes just an enormous amount of intuitive sense to me. So I think that's like one way that you could go, kind of the e-commerce traditional IP build kind of way, and fit that around what NFTs are, which I think I'm actually surprised more people aren't just copying what he's doing. But I think that's like one way you could go. But I do think there will be some amount of like, especially as you see other, like there's a little mini NFT bubble going on in Solana right now. It's not just the lads. There's like Quecks and Tensorians and stuff. And I think there is some amount of, I don't know, like as long as you have these different ecosystems with different characters and different communities, there will always be some amount of demand to be like pride or like emotional connection or community. And I think that's a big part of crypto, at least for the time being. Like one of the macro trends we're riding here is people feeling lonely and wanting to like plug into communities online. And for that reason, I don't know, I can kind of see it. This is how I feel about the Taproot Wizards on Bitcoin too. I'm like, I feel like that's actually going to be a really successful NFT collection. And I'm rooting for them because I would love to see some changes get made in the Bitcoin culture, honestly. And if they can plug those little tiny blocks with transactions, then that's great. I view it as a win-win. So
Listen,
there's only like one of those per chain. It's like CryptoPunks for ETH. I guess it's like Taproot Wizards for Bitcoin. Maybe it's Mad Lads, but it's not like.
I hear you on this. Yeah, it's not
like,
infinite.
The problem with like the altcoin with pictures analogy, it's like pithy and smart, but like A, they're nowhere near the market cap of traditional altcoins, and B, there's nowhere near enough of them that are meaningfully sized. Like it's not really that. It's like a good marketing statement, but it's like not the ground truth.
Fully agree with that. Also, when number go up, anything goes.
Totally.
I think that's true too. Yeah.
Being a part of a community in the bull run is like bag holding in the bear run. You know, it's like all the same stuff. It's fun.
Yeah. In the last NFT cycle, there's also, I mean, NFTs brought in a huge influx of new users, and like they had certain cultural affiliations with these JPEGs that they were kind of encountering for the first time. So there is potential to like actually create new communities there, new JPEG holders.
You know what? I can just as someone who's like a media operator, I can kind of squint at NFTs and see something valuable, which is I'm not a lover of the overall model of media, which is like, you know, eventually you get large enough as a media company where you have to kind of go like very broad. And then you start selling ads on a CPM basis, and it's just super commoditized, and it's like it's a horrible business. There's like any number of examples. NFTs are like the opposite of that. It is 10,000 people or 5,000 people that are like rabid, super engaged people. And it's not the same business model. You have to think about it a different way. But just as someone who's spent a lot of time trying to get people to engage with things, like having that community of people that will just, I don't know, like jump on a plane and go somewhere to an event, or, you know, buy something just because they're part of a community, that's a valuable thing. And I think people will experiment with that idea and find new business models that make sense around it. But yeah, I hear you, Vance. It doesn't make sense for there to be infinite collections that just go up 1,000,000%. And I'm with you on that.
Remember when we were fractionalizing NFTs because, you know, we that way.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Like follow the logic tree. It doesn't work. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay.
On NFTs though, just not the current crop.
I think that's a fair take. Okay, Sam, I'm gonna turn it over to you here because it's been a big week for Cosmos. There was a big prop that ended up getting passed through governance, and maybe the most contentious on governance proposal that ever made it through Cosmos, where the where the inflation rate was decreased by 10%. And this actually led to Jay, who's one of the original founders at Tendermint, to suggest a fork of the Cosmos Hub. So you just like, for those of us who don't spend all their time in the Cosmos, can you just give us the sort of the history of this proposition? Why, we're talking about decreasing the emissions rate, what that's supposed to do, and then talk us through this fork and how meaningful that may or may not be.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, how much time do you have? This is a big one.
10 minutes.
we're an hour into the pod and we're getting into the core subject of it. So
yeah, exactly.
So one point of clarification before we start, the prop was to decrease the target inflation rate, not the actual inflation rate. So I guess just like a little note about how the Cosmos staking system works, or at least the Cosmos Hub, and many of the Cosmos chains follow this model. There is a target stake rate, which is today 66%, and basically based on the number of stake tokens, or the ratio of stake tokens, the inflation will modulate in order to kind of hit that target, and it does so at kind of in this like PID controller type fashion. So there's like a feedback model where it like evaluates, am I close to the target? Am I above the target? If so, then I can decrease the amount of emissions incrementally, and if I'm below the target, I need to increase the amount of emissions in order to hit this 66% target. So what the vote was to change the kind of bounds on this targeting system, so that the maximum amount of emissions that that the system could reach was halved, and it does have impact on validator revenues, like so the real revenues that the validators are pulling in did change, but that number was not halved. So slightly different. This is kind of a long time coming, and something that we have been talking about for basically ever since liquid staking was an idea, so like multiple years. Basically, the whole premise of liquid staking is that you're going to issue this voucher for a staked position, and so you're removing the opportunity cost between staking and yield opportunities in the ecosystem. So theoretically, the stake ratio should increase. You don't need to do the same kind of targeting, because you should kind of naturally the people would be more inclined to have a liquid staked asset and put it in a yield farm somewhere.
So it's kind of like, just to make sure I understand that, Sam, it's like the emissions were basically there to incentivize people to stake and not, and take the opportunity cost of potentially going and doing other things. When you now that you have liquid staking and there's the LSM, which is like, very successfully integrated that within the Cosmos Hub, then that opportunity cost doesn't exist. So to compensate for that, you can actually bring the target emissions down, because people aren't sacrificing that opportunity cost anymore.
Yeah, the targeting system just no longer really makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. This is kind of the difference of opinion that many in the Cosmos ecosystem have with Jay. Jay is like pretty anti-liquid staking from a principles basis. Jay is also a very colorful, complex character, and the kind of origin of a lot of the Cosmos drama was Jay having some serious mental health issues that caused the entire engineering team to migrate to a new entity. there was this kind of great fragmentation that happened in order to kind of continue to build the core infrastructure. And so over the course of several years, like a lot of the kind of key resources that were in and around All in Bits, that this originating entity that Jay controlled, have been kind of migrated elsewhere. I spent a bunch of time moving the trademark and DNS and things like this to a separate entity, and like going through all the kind of legal aspects of that. It created a kind of environment of distrust between Jay and some of the other, really all of the other people in the ecosystem, which is really unfortunate. There's a lot to say there, but it is a complex kind of situation between Jay and a lot of the other core teams. I kind of spearheaded the Atom 2.0 initiative. He really came out strong against a number of the aspects that were kind of described in that paper. It really assumed this like liquid staking world was going to exist, and he fundamentally doesn't think that's the direction that we should move. He has a kind of design in mind where there is no liquid staking, and actually the Atom token is kind of this like internal asset that is like primarily held by infrastructure providers and delegators, and a secondary token called the Photon is issued off of the chain. So it's kind of like a meme coin that lives on top of the hub. And most people that I'm surrounded with felt like this was kind of a non-viable option. People don't really want this secondary token. They want some kind of representation of the kind of internal token of the network. So yeah, it's really kind of like a philosophical difference about the core security system and the core kind of monetary, the connection between the monetary and security systems. And yeah, this vote basically kind of drove Jay to want to experiment with fork. I don't personally think it has a lot of support from any other core team in the ecosystem, or any very few validators or the consumer chains of the Cosmos Hub. I could be proven wrong there, but that's my read of the situation.
So it sounds like we're going to hit some sort of fork here at some point. And historically, I mean, if we think about the major forks that have happened historically, there's like Ethereum Classic, whenever that was, 2016, 2017, obviously all the Bitcoin stuff, but I'll leave that aside because, we're not building apps on Bitcoin. And then there was the proof of work, proof of stake with the merge. Obviously, proof of work chain got decimated immediately. The reasoning, I would say, that Ethereum Classic still exists in conjunction with Ethereum, the canonical chain, whereas Ethereum proof of work does not exist versus Ethereum proof of stake, the canonical chain, is because the variables that decide which chains will live on has fundamentally shifted. Back in 2016, 2017, with Classic, it was really where the miners were going to be. How much hash power were you going to devote to the Classic chain versus the canonical chain? Now you have an element of where are the applications going to decide to deploy their application and support that application going forward. The power has shifted away from validators / miners into where are the canonical examples of like USDC and I know Cosmos is different. I'm just using Ethereum and the forks as example. How would you say, like, what are the variables that you think will be in play for deciding which one of these becomes sort of like the canonical, or do you think it's an element of, both will probably coexist how would you think about that going forward?
Yeah. So one thing is Tendermint, now Comet BFT, is a forkless protocol. So there will be a continuation of the chain that is can be validated by anyone, and it's kind of the chain that we know today. Jay is going to have to spin up a new version of the chain, and kind of get buy-in for that chain. Basically, he's going to have to. I would kind of the monetary asset is really like the most important thing here, and if Jay wants to make this Atom One chain the kind of canonical one, you would have to have all bridges change their pointer to his chain and say that this is the correct representation. That is a big ask. That's a lot of social buy-in to get. That said, the Cosmos architecture was designed for this. Like it's actually a system that encourages forking. Like that's part of the security model. Actually, this is how you ensure that there is kind of minority representation in the system, and it provides a kind of check and balance. So the kind of credible threat to fork is very important in kind of ensuring some degree of like internal regulation, so that so that like minority voices can actually like express themselves within the application, within the chain. So there is the ability to migrate these bridge pointers, the IBC client ID, and there's governance on all of these IBC connected chains that there's a parameter and you can change it, like we built that. So I'm very see how that plays out. I'm glad that the capability exists. It could actually I don't know, heal some things if Jay kind of pours his attention into this and feels like he's able to kind of execute on his vision.
Sorry. I was gonna ask you guys, like, so I've been actually going back and listening to old episodes of Epicenter because I found an episode and I was like, oh, these are actually really good. They went on like a great run from late 2016 to 2018, 2019. And I listened to a lot of interviews that they did during the Bitcoin block size war. So as the Bitcoin block size war was like heating up and when it got to its zenith, when it was really contentious, and I actually had a lot of takeaways from it. But the one thing that everyone was extremely nervous about was the possibility of a hard fork. And the reason why people were worried about that was because it destroys the immutable value proposition or store of wealth value proposition of something like Bitcoin, which is a little bit Bitcoin specific, but also it would break the network effect of Bitcoin. This was a big argument, right? So now if you have two chains, you don't really know how it's going to shake out in terms of miners and hash power, but also some developers might go on chain one versus chain two. People won't know which is the main one, and you'll just divide the network effect that you've accrued and built up. I do kind of wonder that this is obviously the counterfactual and there's no real way to prove this. You could argue that that's really scary and like you don't kind of want to have to deal with that, but maybe there would be some sort of healthy elements to that. And actually one takeaway that I had going back and listening to the Bitcoin block size wars, and maybe this is a heretical thing to say because now the perception of it is like there were these heroic little blockers that, like fought off these corrupt sort of big block companies. But like at the time, the way that it was, and I wasn't paying an enormous amount of attention to it at the time, but it does feel like actually going back, there's like at least there were at least two separate perspectives. Like you could construct the argument, right? I don't think it was like these evil, rapacious people who came in and tried to mess up this good network. I think there were actual legitimate arguments on the other side. And maybe if it had been, I mean, I guess there were like multiple like fork attempts, after this, but I don't know. I think there maybe is another future out there where that big block Bitcoin sort of forked and became something sort of more interesting. And actually a lot of those proponents, became influential in other projects, like Eamon from Avalanche, was kind of sort of more in that community. So I don't really know what my point is here. I just, first of all, I would recommend people go back and listen to that as a unique moment in history. But also, I'd just be curious how you guys think about forks and whether or not they're threats to the chain, or maybe it's a way of actually just the community grows big enough at some point that your tent is too big. Not everyone is marching in the same direction. And it's kind of like a natural way to say, hey, you guys go do your thing, pursue your vision. We're going to go do our thing, pursue our vision. The best vision's going to win. Or maybe we could just be, coexist even. So I don't know. That's where my head went when I was thinking about these forks, because I think
The
it might
credible
actually
threat
be
is
for Cosmos.
still part of the Bitcoin. Credible threat of a fork is still part of the Bitcoin security model. Like you can't get away from a fork. Like it has to be in the conversation. It has to like be out there somewhere. It has to be entertained. The same thing with Ethereum, kind of discussing the possibility of like forking if there was like sufficient censorship. The threat of the fork is super important, and the capability is super important. It's kind of like a mutually assured destruction scenario.
Yeah. I don't know. Vance, Michael, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on any of this, or
I haven't paid enough attention to Cosmos. My last experience with a fork was the ETH proof of work fork, which was there wasn't a separate community. Turns out it was just Chandler Glow and 16 different masks he was wearing. So I don't know.
Do you remember people were saying some funny stuff before that fork? They were like, oh, if there's a fork, then there are going to be punks on the proof of work chain, which is technically the canonical chain, and they're going to grief like the punks on the proof of stake chain. And there was lots of conversations about this, and then none of that stuff ended up happening or being meaningful at all. Like,
Nope.
even a little bit.
Just a scam. That's all it was.
Yeah.
There is crazy MEV between the different exchange rates and different exchanges though.
Yeah, it felt like that was like the last like techno grift of the last cycle. Like everyone was just trying to squeeze that last dollar out of it and go on vacation, but we'll see.
Yeah. Maybe just in closing, do you guys see that clip to take us totally out of crypto of Elon Musk telling advertisers to go?
Love it.
I was like,
delete your Disney subscription.
I told Vance I woke up this morning and checked to see if I still even had a Disney Plus subscription and deleted it.
Really?
Yeah. Elon is so based. I'm so glad he owns Twitter.
Okay, I was actually gonna say that is actually not the most unhinged thing. Did you guys see the KyberSwap exploit and the letter that the KyberSwap exploiter sent? I was like, that is like an entirely new level of sociopathy unlocked by that.
Kyber executives, thank you for your time. You've done great work. Don't let the exit stop you from leaving.
But you know what? The little thing that got me was like, yeah, you know what? Could have happened to anyone. Wasn't your fault. You were good at your jobs, but nevertheless, I'm going to
just a rounding error, up or down.
Crypto is nothing if not entertaining. I mean, that is gold.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, fellas. Good one. Thanks, Sam, for joining us. This was fun, guys.
Yeah, thank you.